Hey old school wrestling fans, welcome to my first special look back at the year 1992, nearly 30 years ago. Hard to believe. A big part of my adolescence and youth when it comes to pro wrestling, because it's around the time I started watching WCW regularly and following the goings on good old ITV back in the day. So I have fond memories of this time, and this is going to be a running feature where I look at and review the year 1992, some of the big matches, some of the key storylines, and the ups and downs in WCW. So I'm going to start off with this TV tape in WCW World Championship Wrestling. Your host is Jim Ross, good old JR. The date is the 4th of January 1992. And I will say I'll be keeping rankings as well of the wrestlers, my own sort of personal top 10 based on what I see in the performances. General sort of comments. So this show opens with a recap of the angle at the end of 91 where the Dangerous Alliance, led by Paulie Dangerously, had a vicious attack on the Elvis lookalike, the rookie Marcus Bagwell. There you see him, all fresh-faced and naive. Who knew what he would become in the years to come? Him and Sting were very much in the spotlight of the alliance. Basically, the manager, Paulie Dangerously, wanted Bagwell to face Austin in a TV title match. He offered him it. He was giving it the big sell, but Bagwell wasn't interested. He kept refusing, saying he wasn't ready, and it led to a beatdown of Bagwell. And that's when Sting came in to make the save, a popular face save, big crowd reaction. But then Rude came in from the backside. He, of course, had been feuding with Sting. At the time, he nails him in the knee, works him over on the knee, hits the Rude Awakening on the stage, and then nails him with the cast in the knee itself, so taking Sting out as well. It was a pretty high angle. I have fond memories of that angle, or vivid memories. Obviously very impressionistic there. So a red hot feud, Sting and his ongoing rivalry with the Dangerous Alliance. In an interview, Paulie Dangerously gives Sting a history lesson where he's talking about Magnum TA back in the 80s. This was a nice callback, but he sort of, a cautionary tale, mentions how PA was at the height of his career as US champion, and then he had that tragic sort of plane accident, or car accident as it was, which sort of shortened his career, and he warns the same could be facing Sting if he messes with Rick Rude much more. Rude himself also said that Sting has one foot in the grave and one foot's on the banana peel, which is quite the line. He also warns Ricky the Jagged Steamboat, who he's feuding with, to stay away from his woman, and that woman is, of course, Medusa. Rude, the US champion at this time, is red hot. And Rude dusts off jobber Greg Sawyer in quick order with his hot Rude Awakening. Next up in the WCW magazine, a fresh face and young looking Eric Bischoff shows us highlights of Jushin Liger's big win Christmas night in the Army in Atlanta, where he defeated Flying Brian in a classic match to become the light heavyweight champion. Quite the result, quite the match to see, and there of course will be an even better rematch at Super Bowl. Next up, The Cruncher, Larry Savisco, is in action, and he defeats Larry Santa. He crunches him, I guess you could say, really roughhouse style. He wins with a submission hold. Larry, another member of the Dangerous Alliance, good stuff from him. And then it's on to a segment with the York Foundation, with Alexandra York, the manager, Terence Taylor, where they've been having some problems, trouble in paradise. Well, she lets down her hair and indicates she's going to sleep with him in this special meeting over the weekend. I tell you what, how times have changed, how conservative that is in wrestling. I mean, it's nothing compared to what we would see later in the Attitude Era. It's funny to go from that to this.
Are you ready? Oh, baby!
I'm going to say it now, the York Foundation were an underrated gimmick, ahead of their time, damn it. But anyway, Terence Taylor looks off his game in a match with jobber Terry Bronson, who actually gets a couple of near falls on him, including a backslide. Taylor very sort of cocky, holding him up on 2 clear pins, but then finally wins with the 5-iron. And post-match, he dumps Alexandra O'York, saying he doesn't need her, he doesn't need the York Foundation, he doesn't need the fans. Funny thing is, you were a heel anyway, Terry, so what are you talking about? Next up, Mr. Who squashes 2 jobbers in a job match. And funny takeaway from this is I actually think Mr. Who's is a decent worker. I think he actually improves over the years. He's a pretty cool monster heel with his business attire and get-up. And this was a fun little job, quite standard match in some ways. But one thing to note, a nice little drop kick, nice little standing drop kick from the 300 plus pounder at one point. So Who's would go on to he's teaming with Cactus Jack and also Vader at this time. Both teams eyeing up a big time feud with the Steiners. And so it's main event time, and it's Double A Arn Anderson of the Dangerous Alliance against the Natural Dustin Rhodes, and they have quite a back and forth match. There's some great chain wrestling. Paul E at ringside is on top phone screening. He pulled the hair, and of course he didn't, but Arn later uses the hair to gain an upper hand. And for a lot of the match, Arn is wrestling on one leg, which is fun to see. Some tremendous selling from him. Finally, he gets the upper hand by working on the arm of Dustin, and it helps when his manager gives a cheap shot with the telephone. And some good chain wrestling, some back and forth, some great near falls. And the match is running out of time, so they say we're actually going to show you the balance, as JR says, of the match in tomorrow's show, in the main event. So we don't actually see a finish on this one. There's some great near falls. There's interference from the Dangerous Alliance. Bobby Eaton at one point with the Alabama Jam, I think it is, off the top rope on Rhodes behind the referee, but Rhodes somehow survives. We see the Anderson Spinebuster at one point, but he can't pin Rhodes straight away. It's a really competitive and fun match, consistent performance. Anderson, one of the most consistent performers in the company at this point, and Rhodes looking very good for a guy of his experience. But yeah, we don't quite get the result. It goes off the air without a result, but I will cover the main event and the remainder of this match tomorrow, on another thing. But really strong main event. I'll give the main event 3.5 stars. So that brings me to my first top 10 ranking of these reviews, so it has to be Rhodes and Anderson at the top with that great main event performance. So Arn Anderson top, I give him 7 points. Then you have Dustin Rhodes second, 6 points. Larry Zbyszko in at 3 with 4 points. Mr. Who's the Bodyguard is 4 with 4. Rick Rude is 5 with 4 points. Terence Taylor 6 with 3 points, leaving the York Foundation, of course. Terry Bronson, the man who actually pushed him quite close, has 3 points on 7. Larry Santo, so many Larrys, he's in at 8 with 2 points. And then Van Hammer, who won the squash match. I almost forgot to mention him and his Hammerheads. He's number 9 with 2 points. And Paul Lee, who was his opponent in that match, 10 with 2 points. So that's the rankings, very early. Of course, they will change many times during the years. But that's my first review for WCW in the year 1992. Thanks for listening, wrestling fans. See you again soon.